Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for.
Movie Wire Podcast, talking about movies with Justin Henson.
Wait. And Alex from Talking Smac.
He likes to see movies.
Not the Movie Wire. Talking Smac.
He likes reviewing them.
This is Alex.
Honest reviews, streaming too. He watches everything. It's the Movie Wire Podcast with your host,
Alex from Talking Smac? Yeah?
Justin Henson.
Really? Ready for my verdict? I don't think you are. Talking Smac.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We have a terrific show this week with...
Justin, I gotta stop you. You can't see Oppenheimer.
Wait, Alex from Talking Smac? Well, Alex, I already saw it. Wait, why are you here wearing a bathrobe and a top hat?
Well, I was listening to your newest episode while in the bath, sipping wine, reading The Economist.
So, a typical Wednesday.
Exactly. And then I realized something. Oppenheimer is a Christopher Nolan film.
Oh, God.
I know.
I can't believe that this can't be happening. Alex, I don't know if I can do this alone. Will you please stay with me for the Oppenheimer review?
Okay. I left my slippers in the Uber. I'll be right back.
Wait, you have to pay for the...
Nice.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you.
That was just for Antonio from the Cultworthy podcast, who is such a huge fan of the last time we did our little skit, Alex, just so you know. I'm sure he is going to love this one. So, Alex, before we jump right into it, I want to say thank you for coming back on the show on this huge, anticipated movie of the summer.
Oh, I am happy to be here. I knew I needed to discuss 3 hours of misery porn with somebody, and I thought, Justin.
Misery loves company, and I cannot wait to deep dive in this. But hey, Alex, before we just jump right into Oppenheimer, do you mind just hanging out for a few minutes? Because I have a very special early review of yet another true story surrounding a brand or product that is a movie based on one of the most insane marketing campaigns ever attempted. And that's Gran Turismo, which opens in theaters everywhere August 11th. So Alex, with you yet again appearing on the show and being the guest, you get the pleasure of kicking us off on a couple of fantastic reviews.
So let's get into it.
Out of the windows, what? A roar and a bursting of flames.
The Movie Wire Podcast.
There it is. You need people like me.
Podcast for hot and trending movies.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Based on the unbelievable and an attempt at an inspiring true story of a team of underdogs, we have a struggling working-class gamer, a failed former race car driver, and an idealistic motorsport executive who risk it all to take on the most elite sport in the world. Releasing August 11th in theaters everywhere is Gran Turismo.
What are we gonna do?
Oh, shut up! I'm not missing my race.
Oh, I'm gonna puke.
Don't pick up my dad's car.
Yes, we're not going to jail.
Oh, crap.
Listen, son. You think you're gonna play a stupid video game about cars and you're gonna become a race car driver?
All I ever wanted to do is be a racer. I'm doing it.
The 10 of you are the best Gran Turismo players in the world. Now is your chance to race real cars.
This is insane.
It's not gonna work. The guys who race are elite athletes. Your kids are scrawny little gamer kids.
That's where you come in.
You think you can do the impossible. I'm here to prove that you can't.
You get tired, you get sloppy, you get hurt, and you lose races! You puked on my lawn.
I know what I'm doing. I'm not afraid. I've raced this track 1,000 times in the game. Let me drive it my way.
That was actually pretty great.
We have a newcomer this year. His presence is shaking the foundation of the sport.
Since the major leagues. The other drivers, your pit crew are going to hate you.
Much easier with a joystick, isn't it?
I can't see anything! I'm not sure if I can do this.
Most people can't. I got a feeling you're not most people.
If I lose more than just a race. So I'm not gonna quit.
You've got to prove to everyone that you belong.
You've raced it, like 1,000 times? Now you just got to do it in real life.
Gran Turismo, based on a true story.
But I won't stop now.
Now, this seems to be the new trend. It seems like every couple of shows now, there is a brand or product based on a true story this year. We have Tetris, BlackBerry, Nike, Flaming Hot Cheetos, and now to Beanie Babies in the Beanie Bubble that I will be covering next week on the show. And now we have Gran Turismo. If we keep going at this pace, we might need a brand new defined genre for these movies. But I do have to give Hollywood a tad bit of credit here, that the first half of the year we had a spike of truly interesting, engaging, and well-executed storytelling surrounding products. To some of the most loved and popular products out there comes a potentially great backstory, followed by a Hollywood attempt at making these interesting stories appeal to audiences. But starting at Flaming Hot Cheetos, we are starting to hear the echo at the peak of the branding film mountain to start to see the tumble of the quality when it comes to truly telling these stories the way they should be told. Now, unlike the previous films this year that we have seen, Gran Turismo isn't the one that has the most nostalgic feeling or one that's loved by all. It's not the product that all of us universally can say that we love. It's a very specific demographic to those that have a love for the popular game or those that just love racing. And I will be the first to admit that I am not that demographic, nor will I pretend to say that this movie convinced me to either 1, play the game, or 2, start watching racing. With my particular taste, finding cars going around in a circle for long periods of time doesn't really appeal to me, nor do I find it entertaining, especially when it comes to the game. Going around a track over and over and over again did not appeal to me or entertain me or did not give me the fun factor. Give me a good old Mario Kart any day where I can at least shoot a shell at a car or have something happen. Then we have this 24-hour race Le Mans in which the racer who covers the greatest distance in 24 hours is the winner, in which this movie does cover this as the big final race. But I do have a respect to those that do find it entertaining, and I do find the competition interesting, and the endurance of it is admirable. But that still doesn't mean I find it interesting to watch or play. But I will say with this movie, it does bring an interesting true story to light. But sadly, the execution is not there. Gran Turismo is based on an actual interesting experiment and marketing campaign by Nissan, which was started by Danny Moore, played by Orlando Bloom, who convinces Nissan to switch their focus on Gran Turismo players to gain interest in their vehicles. Which Danny Moore had an idea to take the top Gran Turismo players and train these players only to pick one single racer to attempt to become a professional race car driver. And to Danny's surprise, Nissan takes him up on his marketing idea. So Danny Moore finds an elite group of players, including our main character, Jan Martinborough, played by Archie Madekwe. Danny also has to find a coach to train these players. And after multiple turndowns from well-known driving coaches, he ends up with, no surprise, an underdog, conflicted, damaged driving coach, Jack Sadler, played by David Harbour. We have all the potential elements here to make a truly feel-good, crowd-pleasing, inspirational true story that, in theory, should separate itself from the other true branding story films that we have seen this year. Now, again, this movie has all the potential elements. We have a group of underdogs with inner conflicts that need to work it out. We have redemption, teamwork, and an interesting story, and above all, a fantastic cast. Here comes the but. We have 2 writers, Jason Hall, who wrote American Sniper, and Zach Balin from Creed 3 and King Richard, who both have a short list of some notable, well-written films. Obviously, these are 2 talented, articulate writers, but we can tell the story was a little out of their element. We have the story concept of these gamers that are in love with the particular game. They get the chance of a lifetime to experience the real deal of their gaming obsession, to become a real-life race car driver. But the entire cast really doesn't have any lies to really buy into a believable excitement of this once-in-a-lifetime event. You can tell when Balin and Hill really hit their writing forte in the film is when it comes to more of the adult lines that fully deal with adult conflicts and the emotional element in the dialogue. The miss these two writers have is separating the young adult to the adult characters apart, as if they didn't know how to contrast the two, giving the portrayal of young adult. The lines have no contrast to separate young adult to adult. It all seems to be the same age. It all seems to be the same bland, generic portrayal going through the entire movie. Between the young adults and the adult characters, the lines are very simplistic, and it's almost like they met in the middle to give a compromise, and that's where we get that generic feeling in the film. And to add to that, every single character just looks miserable, like somebody kidnapped them from their bedrooms holding a gun to their head to get them to race and have the experience of a lifetime. And that isn't helped by director Neil Blomkamp. Now, Blomkamp, some will remember from directing District 9, Elysium, and Chappie. Now, Blomkamp has a distinct gritty style to his three most popular movies, and in a way, though not a trilogy connected by characters or a continuation of a story, but rather a trilogy of social acceptance or societal relevance, if you will, that really drive his motivation to telling these stories. And in a way, I think this was the wrong pick for him, because in a way, it feels like he just can't lose his directorial instincts of leaning on that gritty, bluish tone that just promotes negativity and a sad feeling overall. And given the interpretation of the pen script by Hill and Balin, Blomkamp thought this must have been a perfect attempt at redemption as a director, as a chance to bring back yet another movie of social acceptance, since we haven't seen much from him since 2015's Chappie. Between the screenplay and the interpretation of the material from Blomkamp, this all adds up to a tonal misfire. And even when there are moments we feel we should cheer, it's met by a lingering feeling of staleness. This is the type of movie that should have been met in the middle of Flaming Hot Cheetos and Tetris and add elements of fun, since it surrounds itself around a game that millions of people have fun playing and engulfing themselves in. These filmmakers forgot that the way this true story happened is because of a game. And what feeling do people have by playing games? The elements of fun. I don't think the writers had fun writing it. I don't think the directors had fun directing it. And as an audience member, I didn't have a whole lot of fun watching it. I was waiting for moments to cheer, to feel for our characters, to root for the underdog. I wanted to even be excited for these characters, but right when the movie seems to give us hints that it's going to change its ways and give us something to root for, the filmmakers stop and just say, nope, not today, not on my watch, not today, viewers. But to its credit, even though it lacks the fun factor, there is some interesting moments from the story and the likable performance from David Harbour as Coach Jack Sadler that keeps this movie watchable. It's also great to see Orlando Bloom back on the big screen after about 6 years. Even though this movie needed more screen time of his Danny Moore character, the movie gives some hints at a high-stakes conflict with Moore, and it never really shows the ending result or an exploration of the conflict during his marketing stunt. Same goes to Jimin Hunsu as Jan's father, in which the movie hints at a distant relationship between the father and son, but Hunsu is written like, well, a father who is likable and really cares for his son. But the feel of what Blomkamp is trying to portray is a bit confusing. Blomkamp tries to direct this single character against the dialogue and performance current to portray that this father is against everything that his son Jan does. But I never got that feeling. He seemed just like a father. He's not mean, he's not abusive, he just wants the best for his son. And this makes it off-putting to the film and makes it feel unbalanced, like it wants us to believe something that's not there. When the movie was trying to create more of an encouragement for Jan to succeed, to show his father what he can do, I felt worse for the father than I did Jan. And that may be due to the fact that Honshu outperforms RJ Madekwe, because during the film, I was underwhelmed by Madekwe's performance, where we don't even feel an attempt or risk to his performance to truly stand out. He's treated more like a prop beside a vehicle than a character we want to root for. Gran Turismo, for what it's worth, is an okay way to kill a couple of hours, but it is misdirected on what it really should have been. It has the foundation of an interesting telling of a true story surrounding a brand, but doesn't treat it with the respect and the fun it truly deserved. Gran Turismo didn't make me inspired, I didn't feel the need to grab a tissue, and I definitely didn't feel the need to stand up and cheer for the final big race. And one thing for sure is it definitely didn't make me want to go out and actually watch a real race, but I actually might consider it because sitting through Gran Turismo was just as fun as watching a bunch of race cars go around in circles for 4 hours. Only instead of cars, it's the characters going around in circles. But at least at a race, I can be out in the sun and drink. I'm giving Gran Turismo 2 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure to check out my reviews on previous episodes for movies that just became available to rent, buy, and stream now. Now available. It ends where it all begins in Insidious: The Red Door, which should have kept its door closed completely, receiving 1.5 stars. Be part of her world in the Disney live-action remake to The Little Mermaid, which was a poor, unfortunate soul, receiving only 2 stars. Discover the hero just beneath the surface in Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, which was a much better under-the-sea ride than The Little Mermaid, receiving 3 stars. 4 friends, 1 trip, no luck in the very naughty comedy Joyride, which was a hilarious fun ride, receiving 3 stars. And finally, Worlds Collide in the new addition to the DC Universe in The Flash, which was a fun, fast ride, receiving 3 stars. Now, as many of you have heard or listened to my show, here in the Seattle area, we just had open enrollment in our Snohomish Film Festival, and I had a ton of fun helping to judge all the submissions, but sadly, submissions are now officially closed. I just want to say a big thank you to all of you that submitted. There's been a lot of talent submit their projects, and I have to say what an insane amount of talent we have had this year submit their films. Now, even though submission is now closed, you can still visit the Snohomish Film Festival webpage at www.filmfreeway.com/Snohomish Film Festival. There you can find more information on the festival, and you can also purchase tickets for September 9th from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Don't wait to the last minute. I will see you there. And lastly, now, just recently, I was on the Talking Smac Podcast to discuss the new Barbie film, and it only felt right to invite Alex from the Talking Smac Podcast back on the show to help review Oppenheimer. We are going to bring Alex back in just 1 second, but before we do, please make sure to look up the Talking Smac Podcast. It is an absolutely entertaining, informative show. Alex, Josh, and their ensemble of co-hosts do an amazing job. I can't say enough about this group. But before we bring Alex on, let's hear from Josh over at the Talking Smac Podcast now.
If you love talking blockbuster movies, comic books, animation, and TV shows, check out Talking Smac, hosted by me, Josh Scar, along with my rotating cast of co-hosts. We will talk superheroes, movies, animation, and comics with you every Wednesday on your favorite podcatcher.
The story of American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
We imagine a future, and our imaginings horrify us. They won't fear it until they understand it. And they won't understand it until they've used it. Theory will take you only so far. I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon. But we have no choice. What's happening here?
Oppenheimer raises a lot of questions between right and wrong, progression and standing still, power versus knowledge, and does knowledge really matter if you have no power? And at the forefront of all questions that Oppenheimer attempts to present, what is the most dangerous? The one who created the atomic bomb or the ones with power that control it? Oppenheimer also attempts to intersect ego over morals and begs the question which one has its dominant trait of human nature, ego or morals. It was the great Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park that once said, "You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should." Oppenheimer is jam-packed full of these questions to the point I felt I was being interrogated by the government. And to an extent, that's the film's intent. To rapid-fire its dialogue, never leave room for thought, walk a fine line with the viewer to not question what is happening on screen. Now, is this always successful? No, not completely. But where the film is successful in is the technical achievements, the sound editing, musical score, and of course, the actual performances. This is where the film really shines. Now, with the marketing of the film, director-writer Christopher Nolan stated to see this on the biggest screen you can, the loudest theater you can. I did the exact opposite during my first viewing. I saw it on the smallest possible rinky-dink screen I could find. Then, just recently, I saw it on IMAX. Now, talk about the theater experience. Do you get that experience seeing it on IMAX? Yes, to an extent. But looking towards the future of being realistic, not everybody is going to be able to see this film on IMAX or even the theater, especially when it comes to streaming or VOD. So seeing it on a smaller screen, we start to see where the story is up front and center. This is where I begin to see some story flaws that just didn't sit well with me. And I'm sure that Alex, who is eagerly waiting patiently to chime in, is ready to pull out the boxing gloves. But even though the positives definitely outweigh the negatives in this film, the focal point of the story is where I will make a shocking statement here. For a 3-hour-long movie, the film felt rushed in the story element. Oppenheimer is a technical achievement in sound, music, and performances, but for the 3-hour movie, it lacks pure exploration of the character and depth. Whereas the film focuses on multiple years of Oppenheimer's life, it would have been more relevant given the themes to focus on a single period in Oppenheimer's life to make that really good, thought-provoking film versus what we got. Now, Alex, in our chat, I felt the vibe that we were almost about to pull out the boxing gloves, like I said, but then we saved our thoughts for the show. And I have to say, I am dying to hear what you thought of Oppenheimer.
I almost completely agree with the majority of what you have said, because this 3 hours just flew by. It was non-stop action. There's no fade cuts. There's nothing. It's just hard cut, dialogue. I would be shocked if there was a single scene that lasted more than 4 minutes without just shifting to a different perspective. Now, the film is an achievement in that you know who is telling the story as it balances between what is ultimately both two antagonists and yet protagonists at the same time. Because there is a point where Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Louis Strauss, has some very good points. He is a man concerned about where we're moving forward with our technology, how that technology needs to be used, and whether or not we can just rely upon resting upon our laurels because we've done this once. And then you have Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer, who is trying to control what he has made, but also deal with the fact that he has made false promises to everyone that the film makes it seem like basically came to his ranch to build a bomb. But the problem that I have with the story is not the scope of it, in which the film does look very beautiful. I don't know if it needed to be seen in IMAX because the majority of the film is just talking heads in essentially two different courtrooms. One, a small, confined little space where Oppenheimer is being grilled upon his past activities, and he's the one telling us the story. And then one set about a decade and a half later, in which, in the congressional hearing, in which Strauss is being given the chance to be accountable for his own actions. And yet I don't feel that I actually understood the character of Oppenheimer as much as I understood Strauss. Strauss's motivations are a little more cut and dry. You can see it there. Robert Downey Jr. gives an amazing performance. The way he bounces off other characters, essentially his aides, you start to feel his motivations and you know what he is doing. Despite the sheer amount of time on Cillian Murphy's face and the amount of time as he's telling his own story, you never understood what is actually moving on within his own head. And that is, to me, where I believe the film's ultimate failure lies. Is I watched 3 hours of a film about a man I still don't know anything about at the end of it.
Yeah, I think you brilliantly put it, because that was my biggest issue with the film too, is we have a movie entitled Oppenheimer, and it feels like we want more, because by the end of the film, and again, no spoilers on it, the film is so rapid fire on its dialogue with all these surrounding characters around Oppenheimer. We really don't get to know much about him, other than there's a scene in the movie where we first meet Matt Damon's Leslie Groves, who is giving his almost synopsis in front of Oppenheimer, saying, you have a huge ego, you're stubborn, whatever it may be. The entire 3 hours, we don't get self-discovery in Oppenheimer. We don't see full examples. We just get what we're told by the cast without anything to back it up. And I think with a 3 hour long movie, you're absolutely right, is there's really no time investment in letting us just take that dialogue, have it sink in with the viewer, and make our decision of Oppenheimer. We don't have that much depth to him to an extent. Towards the end, we start to feel a little sympathy and empathy towards him, but that's because of the supporting cast. The supporting cast is really lifting Oppenheimer up, and we're not really getting that self-discovery. And with the IMAX aspect of it, to me, that was a marketing push for higher ticket sales. I mean, that's let's just call it what it was. Now, the sound itself, it was more impressive than the actual visuals to it. The sound was, and the musical score was amazing. To that extent, the IMAX, I felt, was good, but it doesn't need to be seen. The experience I had versus a small screen versus IMAX, I couldn't separate the two, except for maybe some pivotal scenes with some really great audio. But this is not the summer blockbuster that you go to an IMAX theater to really enjoy, is my whole point. And to kind of transition a little bit, you brought up Robert Downey Jr. Absolutely incredible, and the best part of the movie for me is a new range that we haven't seen from Robert Downey in such a long time. And I think with his career right now, this is going to be the pivotal moment that we can really see what he's done versus what we've seen maybe a decade ago.
I think that definitely should be in discussion for an Oscar. What I imagine they will do is they will, of course, give Cillian Murphy his a Best Actor nomination. They'll kind of push Robert Downey Jr. for that supporting actor nomination, which I actually think would be almost a little to the detriment of it, because to me, he, as the main antagonist, I felt I knew more about him and his perception of the world than I had with Cillian Murphy's. And I would want to see them both put up for Best Actor. Now, that being said, another minor criticism I have of the film is that there are two main female roles. One is Florence Pugh, and the other is Emily Blunt. Emily Blunt is Kitty Oppenheimer, his wife. Becomes his wife. And Florence Pugh is this Jean Tatlock, who is a communist sympathizer who he meets in the 30s and kind of like he has this on and off affair with for a long time. I really wonder if the intention of the film was to frame them from the government and Oppenheimer's point of view, which is that they're just mere vessels in his life. Because I felt that other than there's this one brilliant scene quite later on where Emily Blunt is defending her husband before this basically kind of military tribunal, in which she gives this amazing performance, this brief look into her life of she's actually a strong character, not what she's been portrayed at the entire time, which is this kind of alcoholic, deadbeat wife, deadbeat mother. And so my criticisms are very small. But this is one I will ask you about. I'm not sure how much you know about the history of that first, the Trinity test, but this is something I've read from a lot of people. They were not impressed by the boom. Were you impressed by the boom?
No. I was not impressed by the boom. I liked how it was shot, where we have the 3 different aspects of it, and we get the 3 different versions of the event. But I was not impressed, and it's kind of like the opposite of what we got for, well, almost the same of what we got for Barbie. It's like bait and switch a little bit, because the marketing pumps this thing up like it's going to be this huge main event, and we get like 30 seconds. It was a little underwhelming to me with the actual event, and it wasn't what I was expecting, especially coming again from a 3-hour movie. I was hoping the reward going into the second half would have been a little bit more in depth, because I wasn't even impressed with the actual climax of the movie, because I felt it was rushed.
So the reason why I was slightly disappointed in that is, well, we have footage of it. It's mostly in black and white, and the majority of the people were wearing welder's goggles or looking through reflective screens to protect their eyes and stuff like that, because they weren't sure what was going to happen. But as the movie showed, there actually were like 2 or 3 people who just watched it, and according to their eyewitness accounts, they saw colors they'd never seen before. There were golds and purples and greens that merged, and as it began its pillar in the sky, it finally did become this red blossom. But they were not expecting this neon vibrancy to it, which made it all the more horrifying. So I was a little disappointed. I'm like, that, for someone who's known for such historical accuracy, that we didn't get to see those other shades within it. Now I will say, during that moment, the way they, as you said, they switched between 3 different perspectives of the different distances people needed to be, because they still weren't sure how close they could be. The just fading the music down, the showing of the roiling fire, the only sound for quite a while being the breathing of Oppenheimer as he's watching the culmination of his life become this thing that may or may not do anything, or may do everything. And then you get the sound wave as it blows through everybody and brings back the chorus, the music. So beautiful. And that is where I am torn with my rating for this. That's roughly at the 2-hour mark, and we have another hour beyond that. And this film was just rushing the entire time. I almost wonder if the director's insistence upon IMAX, and IMAX basically has a hard limit of 3 hours because of the size of their platters and the hugeness in the rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if the film becomes this runaway train, no stops, all chug, all power, because of the insistence on this, was it 75 millimeter or 150, whatever IMAX format is. And I wonder if that takes away from it, because that is essentially the only quote unquote action of the film. Everything else is the action of personalities.
Yeah. And when we get to this moment, and here's where I had an issue with it. And I think the messaging, and I'll make 2 different points here. The messaging with it, I don't think was landed, because we're talking about the creation of the atom bomb. This was a terrifying moment for those testing it, along with the world after it was initially created. This is an act of horror for a lot of people. And when we go to the introduction, the countdown, I didn't feel that horror. I felt suspense. Anybody working there, you can't tell me they were excited to set this bomb off. They were excited to see what this bomb's going to do. It was unpredictable. You have that prediction of it igniting the atmosphere, and you have these guys that are just anticipating this explosion. As an audience member, I was on the edge of my seat when this went off, but that's not the feeling I should have gotten. I should have felt the horror and the fear coming from the people that are actually there. And the movie has that overwhelming theme that we don't really take the topic at hand as a horrific event. It's treated as entertainment. And this movie should have come out to prove a point of how important and how the overall theme of fear and knowledge and power all integrate into our characters. We should be scared. And my second point that I'll make is we jam-pack this movie full of all these cameos, all these big name stars. And I would have gone the opposite. some unknown stars. To me, the actors became a distraction to the actual point, and it took it away to the point, I think, at the end where Truman comes on, I had a couple people behind me that wouldn't shut up thinking that was Bryan Cranston. And you have these discussions of, oh, who is that? Who is that? Oh, that's that guy from... It takes away from the messaging. There are very small, detailed elements in this movie that takes away from what this movie should have proven and should have done.
When you have names like Kenneth Branagh, I was like, oh, like I expected his role to be larger because I know a bit about Niels Bohr and why he was so important to be there. But then when you're running through Rami Malek, who I was like, oh, okay, he's in this movie as well. And then for Scenes 2. Then Dane DeHaan, I was like, oh yeah, Dane DeHaan. I haven't seen him in a movie in like 5 years. But then you just go down and you have Jack Quaid, and then you have Josh Hartnett, who I was like, is that Josh Hartnett? And then you have Dave Desmuchulin. I can't pronounce his name correctly, but I know him from the Suicide Squad remake where he was like Ratman or something like that. I forget his character's name.
Yeah,
Polka Dot Man. There we go. I'm looking at all these people who are popping through, and then you have Harry S. Truman played by Gary Oldman for 35 seconds.
Yeah,
and to me, it was almost like it was kind of like a checklist of like I felt like I should have shouted bingo at one point.
Yeah,
like, and then maybe then the movie would have sped up a little bit. I will say though, I mean, Jason Clarke was fantastic in his role as Roger Robb, a tyrannical evil person of a lawyer. While well cast, you can't tell me that some of these roles that people are there for 2 hours of shooting could not have been a no-name person, could not have been somebody who was looking for their SAG heart or something like that, because it does start to take away when you're trying to push these points across of all these people's motivations when you're going spot the cameo.
Yeah,
this is not a comedy, and as you said brilliantly, like. When it got to the explosion, I should have felt more horror. That culminating at that point, I do understand that in real life it was a celebration. Those kind of things were happening. They were taking bets on the magnitude, the tonnage, and all this stuff of whether or not things would be completely obliterated or how much of the world would be turned to glass in that area. But when it shifts towards the last hour, which is more courtroom drama about whether or not we should be making thermonuclear bombs, I don't think enough time was given to that. They do, and I'm not saying that we needed to see them dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I actually appreciate that it was kept within the U.S., within the confines of we did some things, we took it away from the Oppenheimer, and look what we've done.
Yeah.
But not enough investment was given in him being horrified by what he created and what they will create without him, which to me, that is also part of where I'm trying to understand how egotistical he is, that I don't think the film gave me enough of. Like they said, like when they mention all these things about him, and one of them, he's like, oh, yeah, you're also like a huge womanizer. We don't see that. We see him have this on and off affair that started before his marriage. And then we get a kind of a casual reference later on of like, does anyone know that you were also with her? And like, no. That just, you're not showing me the nuance of him. It is being told the nuance of him.
Yeah.
Without actually giving nuance. It's kind of like, there are so many strong hits that these little misses add up. Because at the end of the film, I'm exhausted, but I'm not sure I'm satisfied.
Yeah, and I'm feeling the same way. And we take a lot of the actors that we talked about kind of being thrown in. Like, we talk about him being a womanizer, and a lot of these roles that we see, or these moments that we see, could have easily been taken out, because I don't think they add a lot of relevance to it, especially when we are pushing a 3-hour movie. Like, we take Florence Pugh. The only reason that she's in there is to show her boobs. They add no depth to her. It's almost like she's randomly thrown in where it's necessary to try and attempt to prove personality trait of Oppenheimer, but they never keep going to really explain it. I think she would have been a really great character if there was more depth to her, instead of the movie treating her more like an object almost. And I think that was a missed opportunity.
I agree with that. She has maybe 4 or 5 scenes, and three of them are in some kind of undress, which is shot, because it is Christopher Nolan, it is shot in such a sterile way that it's almost distracting, because if we're supposed to be observing these two people in love, I felt like I was watching a dress run for a play where it's like, okay, you have some dialogue and now you're undressed and you're reading a book. And it's like, good. And that to me is also what I dislike about their treatment of her character. I already referenced that Katie Oppenheimer was just kind of, other than her one good glorious scene of cross-examination, she was just kind of like, yes, she's drunk in this scene. Jean Tatlock, she's supposed to be some kind of communist seductress, but it is a metaphor that's hit over the head while she's having him read the infamous line as they're copulating, "I am become death." It's like, this is on the nose. Because yes, where it's like, oh yes, your relationship with her can cause your death. But also, she's a communist, which can lead to your death, which will lead to your death, during government inquisitions that happen in the 50s as the Red Scare takes over. It's so on the nose, it just hurts the film. And yet, I love this film in so many little ways too, because when we do get moments of Oppenheimer by himself where the sound comes in, like, I always thought that repeating sound was that the thudding was a train, and the big reveal that it's actually people stomping and waiting for him and applauding him. I was like, that was good. I know we're not doing spoilers, but the final scene before the montage, the final scene of the movie with the reveal of the oft talked about conversation that Strauss observed from the distance of Einstein and Oppie, the actual reveal of what was discussed was beautiful.
That's what
that hit me so hard.
And that's that scene, and I'm glad you brought that up. And again, no spoilers on it. But that scene is what drove a little of my frustration of the climax, not because it was a bad scene. I loved that scene. I love that scene so much. And it almost shows me of what could have been. I wanted more of that because we have this conversation between these two brilliant men. It's the true testament of the only real element that I felt human, that we saw something that went deeper. And I know when we talk about a climax, it needs to put a bow on the movie. It needs to sum everything up. But that emotional impact we got would have been more beneficial if we got that maybe in the middle of the movie or going into the third act, so we have time to react to that emotion. I love that scene so much that it just frustrated me a little bit because the climax is rushed, where we have this 2 hours and 40 minutes worth of just rapid fire dialogue. We don't take a minute to really breathe on the momentous plot. We don't have time to piece things together on what Nolan is trying to tell us. And then we go into that rushed court scene that it still doesn't give us a lot of detail on what's going on behind the scenes. And Nolan knows how to press my buttons when it comes to period pieces because he nailed every pet peeve I have. What drives me crazy is where we always have to go in a period piece where we fast forward where he's older. This was, to me, the frustrating piece of it, where we should have focused on the most important piece, which would have been the actual event, the creation of the bomb, and left it at that. Because the last half hour is so rushed, I don't think it added anything except for that one final scene. I don't think it made me feel any differently. And this is kind of the point that I've said on my show numerous times. When you go to a movie and walk out, a good movie will entertain. It will keep your attention. A great movie will change the way you think. This movie isn't a great movie. It didn't change the way I thought. But to your point, it is a good movie in a lot of different aspects. Is it entertaining? Yes. The performances, dialogue, it all drives that movie to where it doesn't really feel like 3 hours. It is a decent movie, but when it comes to a period piece, I don't think they even came close to what it should have been on proving a major theme or point. Now, does every single movie need to have a symbolic theme, an emotional aspect to really get into your psyche? Absolutely not. It's all about the filmmaker's intent. If Christopher Nolan sought out to make this big summer blockbuster about Oppenheimer with a lot of special effects, then that would be his intent. And did it entertain? That would be a different review. But what we see here is an attempt to have an emotional reaction, to have a symbolic theme, to ask the audience some questions. Does he succeed? No, not entirely. And this is where, in my opinion, we see a lack of execution. And I can see and respect what Nolan is trying to do, especially being shot from a first-person point of view from Oppenheimer, but it comes across and translates as confusing when it comes to the messaging. The movie itself isn't confusing. It's what the message that Nolan is trying to portray is. And I think his filmmaking intent was admirable, but it missed the mark. So I'm going to base my review partially on the filmmaker's intent. And again, that does not mean this is a bad film, because it's not. I just think Nolan was a little misguided.
I agree. Yeah. You've said it perfectly. And at the end, I have to agree with all that, because I believe it has earned its right to make over $100 million. It's doing successful at the box office. I am glad that people will take a moment to see this film and understand the conflicts and the paranoia that kind of led to this moment of the creation of this weapon. And even now in the modern setting, I think it is a timely movie in that we have conflicts in which different states are talking about using nuclear weapons on each other because they've been fighting for a year and a half now, if not longer. I just wish it would have taken a moment to make me understand Oppenheimer himself and the actual horror of what we have wrought into this world.
Nolan had a story with a great message in his lap. He had a great intent, but the execution was flawed. This is such an important topic that we're still talking about today when it comes to weapons of mass destruction. And out of any time with the world as it is now, to land a message about power versus morals, knowledge and power, this would have been a brilliant movie and time to really land a message. And this is where Nolan shows his flaws in his storytelling versus spectacle, is we don't get that. Christopher Nolan, I'm not mad, I'm just very disappointed. You created a spectacle versus something with substance that could have really had the opportunity of changing the mindset. But for an entertaining movie, it is there. And I guarantee you, I'll call it now because I know we're probably going to have another Oscars party at the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Is where it deserves. Sound editing, music score, and performances, and we can pick from the litter, but Robert Downey Jr., I will be very disappointed if he doesn't get a nomination. Unfortunately, this is where I'm going to be disappointed. I don't see anything in the back half of the year yet, unless we get some surprises, that's going to act as the fan favorite to be on Best Picture nomination. This one so far in the first half of the year is going to be the front runner when it comes to the fan favorite. We had Everything Everywhere All at Once as the fan favorite that won last year, and I am not going to get into it on this show with you, Alex, on that one. But this one is probably going to be up there unless we get some surprises in the back half of the year.
If I had to gamble right now, like for some reason, let's just say Barbie and Oppenheimer both nominated for Best Picture, and for some reason, because of like you said, the back half of the year still kind of spotty. What may come out, what may be delayed. I would be rooting hard for Barbie.
I am so glad you said that, because this is the unfortunate thing, and we can save this rant for the next end of the year. But Barbie and Oppenheimer, they're two separate art forms. And this is what the sad piece, and I could go on a whole other episode on this, is because it's almost like Barbie just doesn't fit into Best Picture. It's like the way they treat comic book movies and comedies. It's rare we'll see a movie like that go into the Best Picture nomination, which is a complete disappointment, because when we look at movies this year, Barbie does stand above the rest, especially when we're talking fan favorites to be nominated for Best Picture. I'm going to score Barbie higher than I am Oppenheimer, because I think when it comes to across the board, when it comes to storytelling and technical aspects, Barbie does a better job. And it's going to be unfortunate, because I would hope that Barbie would be up there as a fan favorite for Best Picture. Barbie as Best Picture. It's almost like a parody going into it. But I would not be disappointed at this exact time, based on what we've had in the previous months, if Barbie got nominated. I would be happier with that than Oppenheimer. I think it's more well-deserved. Oppenheimer deserves to be in other categories at the Academy Awards.
Technical achievements and a few performances.
Yep.
Not picture of the year.
No, by far. And there's going to be a lot of strong opinions on this movie. Some people are just in love with this movie. I'm not. I thought it was just an entertaining spectacle for the summer that it's a good way to kill 3 hours.
I agree that our verdicts are in.
So, Alex, I know when I'm on your show, I give you the must-see or the complete garbage reviews. What is going to be, out of 4, your rating?
2.
2. Okay. I'm going to go
stars.
A little bit higher. I thought we were going to go opposite. You're surprising me every single review. In terms of entertainment value and all the technical aspects of it, it outweighs the negatives for me. So when it comes to entertaining, I am going to give it a very marginal 3 stars. And I just want to clarify, the movie lacks its story and depth, but with everything else, if you take the performances and the technical achievements, I think it's a good view and an entertaining view. And that's why I'm giving it a 3 stars. Not the intent of Christopher Nolan's storytelling.
Wow. Well, while you do the rest of the show, I'm going to finish my shower. Is it just down the hall and to the left?
Yeah, make sure you knock. So, Alex, I hope you enjoy the rest of your bath. I want to thank you for coming on to the show. It's always a delight when you pop on, especially when Josh isn't here. So
that makes it better.
Refill that glass of wine, and we will see you next time, Alex.
Thank you.
Say goodbye, Alex.
Bye, Alex.
And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank our amazing Alex over at the Talking Smac Podcast for joining me on a fantastic review this week on the show. And please don't forget to support the Talking Smac Podcast. The link will be in the description of this episode. You can also support this show by following me on Instagram, Twitter, Thread, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Until next week, do me a favor, make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at MovieWireShow or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.